audience. My name is Luke Duran, and it is with great pleasure and pride that I, along with co-organizer AAG Conference, introduce Kuntala Lahiri-Dutt, who will enlighten us on her new text, Dancing with the River, People and Life on the Chars, or Chores, of South Asia. And with a brief bio sketch of Dr. Lahiri-Dutt. She is a senior fellow in the Resource, Environment and Development Group at the Crawford School of Public Policy in the College of Asia and the Pacific at the Australian National University, or ANU. Kuntala was trained in geography from Lady Brabourne College and Calcutta University in India, and taught at the University of Burdwan from 1982 to 2002, before joining ANU in 2002. At ANU, Kuntala convenes the gender specialization in the Masters of Applied Anthropology and Participatory Development program, and supervises doctoral students studying resource conflicts and agrarian change in Asia. Kuntala's research focuses on the challenges of inclusion in two areas of resource use: water and mineral extractive industries. And she brings new ways of thinking about both. Kuntala has published on these topics in international journals, as well as on the history and politics of large-scale river control in India. With funding from the Australian Research Council, Kuntala is currently investigating the moral economy of informal mining in South and Southeast Asia. Her publications, in addition to Dancing with the River, published jointly with Gopa Samanta, who are also very pleased to have co-author Gopa Samanta with us. She's in the Department of Geography at University of Burdwan in West Bengal, India. So in addition to that text, which is Yale University Press, 2013, she has also published In Search of a Homeland, Anglo-Indians, and McCluskey-Gunj, which is Minerva Press in Kolkata in 1990. On water, Kuntala has edited two key texts. First is entitled Water First, Issues and Challenges for Nations and Communities in South Asia. This is with Bob Wasson. This is Sage Press in 2008. And a text entitled Fluid Bonds, Views on Gender and Water with Street Press in 2006. So I'm really honored to have you. I've had the pleasure of meeting her, so we're really pleased. So
thank you. Thank you. It's a very generous introduction. Thank you. Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. Thank you for coming to this session. I come to the AAG and the world of international geographical research as a subaltern. Although I'm now based in the ANU, 2/3 of my academic life was spent in India. The likes of me are expected to provide data. We are generally the sources of facts rather than the sources of theory. So a big thank you to Luke and Eski for organizing this session to give me an opportunity to talk about this book. One person I would like to acknowledge today is Dr. Gopa Samanta, my co-author of this book. I have known Gopa since 1986. When fresh from her village, she started her studies in geography in Burdwan University, where I taught at that time, where she later undertook her doctoral studies and where she now teaches. She was the first person in her family to go to university. So we have both traveled a long way, and I don't mean just from the other side of the world to be present here today. You would wonder about the relationship dynamics between us. Over all these years, our relationship has matured beyond the classical mold of mentor-mentee. In Indian tradition, such relationships were described as guru-shishya, so in which the shishya, the disciple, carries forth the learnings from the guru, the teacher. Together, we wrote a book about chores and their microcosmic worlds that are thickly inhabited by people. Chores are sandy, low-lying pieces of land rising from shallow riverbeds throughout the lower Ganga floodplains. One can say that these are river islands formed of sandy alluvium brought down by the rivers. They are more numerous in the lower reaches. They are known by various names. In Bihar, they are called Diara. In the western part of Bengal Basin, they are called Mana. Chors are also called Bada or Bada Jomi in Bengal, and I will come to that later. It is important to remember that the chors are an integral part of the river channels throughout the Bengal Basin. For this reason, the chors inhabit an uncertain gray zone between land and water. They can be described as partly land, but then they would also demand to be known as partly water. Yet they are neither fully terra firma as we know it, nor are they water or rivers as we are accustomed to think about them. We say in this book that the chors constitute not just a movable feast of land and water in a certain proportion, but offer a different way of thinking about the environment. Chors are part of the ecology of floodplains, but we show in this book that they are also the products of history. Again, I will come to that later. Chors exist in the real world, but they are also metaphors for an ungovernable and borderless state of the environment. On chors, the very idea of border, environmentally between land and water, and politically between two administrative units, loses its usefulness. And as if to emphasize that point, borderless people inhabit this environment and make a living every day. This is why the existence of chors is never entirely real, nor are most of the choruas, the river gypsies who live on the chors, inside the river banks, yet thinking of themselves as outside citizens of any particular country. The nomadic chors and their wandering people, like many others in Asia, inhabit a non-legal, illegible, ungoverned, and ungovernable space. This image grab from Google gives you an idea of Bengal, the region that houses innumerable chors. Politically, since 1947, it has been divided into two separate units. West Bengal, which is a part of India, and Bangladesh, which began its life as East Pakistan. Geographers describe this region as Bengal Basin, surrounded on three sides by old and young mountains, the Chotanagpur Plateau on the west, the Himalayas on the north and east. It is a great fan where the mighty Ganga doubles in size and is joined by her brother, the Brahmaputra. Great many rivers descend down from the surrounding hills, carrying enormous amounts of silt with their waters, and divide into innumerable channels before dissolving into the Bay of Bengal. These capricious rivers completely dominate life in Bengal. Life in Bengal is rich and abundant. Not only does it support more than 200 million people, the mouth of the delta is also the location of Sundarbans, the mangrove forests, home to the planet's largest remaining tiger population. All of this is ultimately made possible by the waters that flow through the land and the precious gift they bring. The gift these rivers bring is mud. Between them, the Ganga and the Brahmaputra carry more sediment than any other river system, twice as much as the Amazon, 4 times as much as the Nile. 13 million tons are carried to the delta every day. Bengal is made of clay silt carried down from the hills by the rivers over the millennia. In the whole of Bengal basin, there is no rock. In places, the mud is up to 5 kilometers, 3 miles deep. The weight of the mud has pushed down the underlying bedrock, leaving a flat countryside, flat for as far the eye can see. Bengal may be flat, but it is a dynamic landscape. During the monsoons, when the rivers come to life, they change their courses as they drop their sediments and choke on them. The deposited mud may form what the geomorphologists call sandbars and slough. To the local people, they are just chores. Experts use a term, braided, for river channels that are twisted like a woman's long hair. When a channel splits into a number of branches, it is called intricate braiding. Many large rivers in tropical regions have such intricate braiding. I went into all this just to point out that chores are integral parts of the ecological processes that go on in floodplains. This image capture from Google Earth gives you a closer view of our study area, the Damodar River. The town of Burdwan is located just to the north of the Damodar River. The Damodar has been intensively studied for various reasons. In fact, one of the earliest papers on the Damodar was published in the US. In Geographical Review in 1950, William Kirk described the Damodar Valley as Vallis Optima because of its richness in mineral wealth, and the Damodar Valley Project, the dam project that was started in 1948 by the newly independent Indian state. The establishment of the Damodar Valley Corporation, or the DVC, and the selection by the World Commission on Dams of one of its dams for intensive scrutiny meant that the river has been extensively studied by many, particularly the students of Burdwan University. This is the general area where we undertook our surveys, and as we became more familiar with the people, we did a complete census at one given point of time of 11 chores that were located in this area. Let me show you what the chores look like. As I said, chores are positioned within a river's channel. They coexist with and lie next to some of the richest farming lands in Bengal, yet remain unknown, remote, and relatively less studied. Newly formed chores are naturally transitory and fragile. Their shapes change constantly, and their edges may start eroding at any time due to river currents. A whole chore may disappear overnight. During the monsoon months, the chores are all surrounded by water, where the low-lying chores may even get completely inundated. Some island chores can only be accessed by crossing a river channel, even during the dry season. But that is not the entire story. It would be wrong to think that the chores are results of only accretion. Chores are also subject to erosion. Their banks can be eroded slowly or suddenly. In Bangla, erosion of the bank is called bhanga or bhangon. Consequently, the constantly present possibility of bhanga, Choruas have developed an elaborate nomenclature of how the chores break up. The three main types of bhanga are bhanga, chapa bhanga, when there is additional pressure and the land gives way. And Hadiya Bhanga, when the chor breaks like a hardy or a bowl, a earthen bowl. Others are Nishi Bhanga, when the chores break at night. Chachra Bhanga, which is receding flood waters pulling away sediments from newly emerged chores. The twin processes of accretion and erosion make the chores most impermanent. Abdul Baqi, he's a professor of geography in Dhaka University and an authority on chores. He wrote the first book on chores, called them Land of Allah Jane in the book that was published in late 1990s. Allah Jane means God only knows. So in this research we involved the local people to think about their environment. Here is an artist's impression of a chor in the Damodar River. This is an important question to ask. Unlike other social scientists in India, most geographers continue to be heavily influenced by the philosophy of positivism. Geographical knowledge of rivers as it has traditionally developed in India has three broad characteristics. First is the study of humans is completely separated from the study of rivers. And the second one is all rivers are treated as essentially similar systems that are subjected to morphometric analysis. We were told that the dendritic shape is the ideal, and any deviation from that dendritic shape is, we have to know why this has happened. Lastly, most geography books on rivers still see equilibrium as the ideal condition, thus presenting floods as a problem, a temporary inequilibrium condition. And you would understand that such a way of thinking would lead students to the conclusion that dams are good for controlling floods. An intense society-nature fracture has ensued in this knowledge system. The idea of harnessing the river, words like taming the river, implies an uncivility in river behavior, signifying a nature that is ferociously out of control. So it is interesting that this artificial binary between the two was being debated as early as 1990s. The impetus for such thinking came from developments in the international arena, but also regional water sharing treaties and the huge emphasis on dam construction. Overall, the 1990s turned into an exciting time to think about water. The idea of living with floods was mooted regionally, but the civil society groups that established a SARC-wide, SARC is South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, the entire South Asian countries, the civil society groups got together, started an initiative to converse with other groups across political borders. Somehow I became involved with them. And this picture is from that time, and you can see the discoloration from old age. But it gives you an impression of the path I have traveled to write this book. So I had to my own rivers to cross. This book reasserts that not all nature is so socially constructed, and that we human beings live and make a livelihood within the nooks and crannies of the environment, making adjustments to the constantly changing conditions. Several things disturb the foundation of knowledge that I had gathered from textbooks. Reading James Scott's Seeing Like a State was probably the turning point in my life. At that time, it was difficult to get hold of books published in foreign countries, and often I would photocopy them in phases to bind them later as a book. This copy of the book has now traveled across the oceans with me, and it's in my office in Australia. But closer to home, challenge to my geography textbook lessons also came from Medha Patkar, whose photo you're seeing here now, who was mobilizing at the grassroots to stop the construction of dams on the Narmada River. Her movement arrived in eastern India where I lived and worked. I became associated with the small activist groups that were working with Medha Patkar and writing submissions for the WCD. I think I have learned most about waters and rivers from these groups. As I was leaving Burdwan in 2002, Gopa's doctoral research was completed and she joined me in studying the chores of Damodar. To travel through Bengal is to experience a country where the boundaries between land and water are blurred. Water is everywhere, in rice paddies, village ponds, and the hundreds of rivers that cut through the land. The Ganga and Brahmaputra together drain an area 14 times the size of the Bengal basin, and as if all the rivers of Western Europe flowed through England. That's the comparison. 80% of the rain that feed through the rivers fall during the 3 months of the monsoons. It is small wonder that in Bengal, floods are most common. The rivers fill up with water, chores vanish, and chore people must find ways to survive. It is a temporary, tentative, uncertain existence. This book is about this tenuous existence, a heavily contextualized empirical work that contributes to a fuller development of what Appadurai and Breckenridge outline as wet theory. Wet theory, according to them, is theory that can give up the idea of permanence in thinking of land and landscapes, bring to the fore the constant negotiations between land and water, the rivers, the seas, and lakes. Wet theory does not need to rely on a hard edge